Welcome to the Soul Fam podcast. On today's episode, Lisa Matson, founder of Elk Dog Ranch Clothing Company, is here to talk about the healing, transformative abilities of horses, her new clothing line, and her current fundraiser for All Seated at the Barn, which is a rescue organization that rescues horses from slaughter, often in Texas and other locations around the country. And if you're familiar with them at all, they raise money on the go as they're rescuing horses. And Lisa is going to tell us all about her adventure into the horse world, her healing process, and how she came about to establish her brand and bring it all home with All Seated in the Barn. How are you, Lisa?
I'm great, Diana. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining us. So Lisa and I are friends. We are both in the horse world. We have both experienced some horse healing on our own different levels. And Lisa did not grow up on the farm specifically, but really came into the horse world in the last couple of years, maybe 4 years. It seems like a while, actually. But Lisa's home burned down in the 2018 fires in Malibu, which some people are familiar with, some people aren't, but it was a really devastating sort of fire throughout this particular community, which is rich with horses. And Lisa has been transforming her life. She has since moved to Colorado and has a small ranch, and not only has horses, but has donkeys and sheep and ducks and geese and her dog Clancy. And I hope the Soul family is open to hearing Lisa's story. It is powerful and emotional and transformative. And I really honor what she is doing, both on a personal level and at her farm, at her little ranch, and what she's doing with Elk Dog Clothing Company. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happened? And I know it's a big story, but can you kind of put it in a little bit of a nutshell?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my journey to horses started when I was really young, but as most of us do, we put things away to be practical. And so I grew up in Los Angeles and spent most of my time in the luxury retail space and was a buyer for decades for some of the biggest retailers out there. And shortly after my divorce, I had moved out to kind of the inland of Malibu, in a little kind of tiny cowboy town called Cornell, and was living there on 5 acres. And on the night of, I think it was November 8th, I went home from work and the Woolsey Fire was going. It was probably the second big fire in the area around that time frame, but the largest in terms of impact in California. And I was at the house until about 5:30 in the morning, and we were surrounded by two huge horse farms, and that's part of what had drawn me back there, was wanting to live in a place and drawing back to something that I had loved as a kid and never made part of my life. And I didn't leave mainly because we were evacuating animals. There were, over 100 horses and alpacas that needed to be evacuated. And I was just committed to not getting in the way and supporting wherever I could. I left my house about 5:30 in the morning. We got notice the next day that our house burnt down at about 6:30. So the flames when we left were only a few hundred yards away, if that, when we actually pulled out. So we went through that experience driving down. I was driving down Canaan basically with flames on each side of the road, hoping that I had picked the right direction, and that we were going to be able to get out, because we waited so long until we left the property. So from that, the gift was that we were okay, but everything was gone. I left with my dog in a backpack, and everything else that I knew and owned was gone within an hour of leaving. And that takes a really big toll on you. And they have something that they refer to as fire brain that happens, which is actually impacts you from the actual smoke. And the anxiety of what's going on, and the combination of the two actually put you in this place where cognitively you're at a disadvantage while your body is kind of recovering from that physical part of the fire. And through that journey, I decided to step away from work and kind of get my life back together. I was flying back and forth to New York, meeting with rappers and movie stars for this really large company. And I was like, what is going on? This makes absolutely no sense. I was living in hotels for over 6 months and just trying to like get life back together. And through that process, I did every modality you could think of: yoga, breath work, hiking, all of the things. And it all helped. It was all part of the process. But it wasn't until I went back to trying to figure out what I enjoyed in life. And I went back to this memory of a kid and how empowered I felt as a 6 year old getting an opportunity to ride a horse. And so that led me to reaching out, just Googling Malibu horses. And I was literally guided to meeting a woman named Tally who does rides in Malibu and also does equine therapy. And through Tally, I was gifted the opportunity of time with horses. And she basically encouraged me to come and sit in the pasture and just be. She's like, as long as you need to, as many times as you need to. And I think, Diana, I probably spent 5 to 6 days a week sitting in a horse pasture for 3 or 4 hours at a time, just trying to feel normal again and reflective. And so that's really where it started, where I found my way kind of back to the horse world and making it a really big part of my life.
I want to interject just a little bit about the particular situation you're in when the house burned down. You did not own any horses at that time, but there were animals on the property. You and I have talked about this before. There are many, just for our audience, there were many horse farms and small acreages in that particular area, and sort of keeping horses or other farm animals is not unusual. But there were farm animals on your property at the time, correct?
Yeah, we had Lena, who was one horse that uh, my landlord who owned the property, who was living on a fifth wheel in the property, he had raised her. And so she was there. And then we also had a few alpaca. And so we were able to load Lena. And a lot of our time was spent trying to get those alpaca in the same
Hmm.
trailer. And these are
Hmm.
animals who had never left this land. And so that it was a journey. And it was, you know, they all survived and everyone was
Hmm.
okay. But it was a really tough situation. We actually had to leave the alpaca. I spent most of my nights setting up a space, watering it down, putting water buckets, doing everything that we could, knowing that the way Malibu works, because I had done horse evacuations before, is that they will come and get the animals.
Hmm.
Um, and there were certain things that you can do, making sure they're not tied up and all of those things to hope that they survived. But we got to the point where we weren't going to get out if we didn't kind of make that choice. So it was a
Right.
tough one. It was definitely a tough night and probably one of the hardest things for me to reckon with in that
Ri-
journey. So showing up in that property 4 days later and knowing and seeing them and they were okay was such, the gift of protection that we knew happened for them.
And the alpacas, tell me what happened when you pulled in the driveway with the alpacas.
When we pulled into the driveway, they came running because they actually had moved them a little bit south. And they came running as soon as they saw my car. And I stopped the car and ran over to the pasture. And they were just so excited to see me and Clancy. They started talking and like making all these noise. They were like, for sure, they were like trying to explain to me the crazy that had happened to them. Um, but just this huge also sense of relief that, to see someone that they had spent, their days with. And so it was really actually a special moment.
I want to talk about this particular aspect of your healing process because a lot of us go through trauma, and there's people in North Carolina still trying to dig themselves out and reestablish themselves. I'm sure there's currently heavy winds and rain and snow in the Northwest at the moment. And it's just a big change in the world, sort of weather-wise and health-wise in so many different levels. And you went through this process early, so to speak. I think a lot of people are going through a lot of transformation, a lot of change. We're also getting back to the land is what I see happening. A lot of people finding value in living a quieter life, a more self-sustaining life, and really appreciating the animals for what they are in different ways, and understanding that horses are not they're immense animals in a lot of different ways, whether you're ranching or farming or you're a show person, and they can also be huge healing assets to us.
Mhm.
So that's why, in part, I was hoping for you to share your story, and I think everybody can really benefit from it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I can only speak to my own, circumstances. When you go through events like this, it's so personal. But there is a lot of commonality that I found as I've like kind of processed through this journey. One of the things, especially with natural disasters, is like nature is where we're supposed to find our safety and our, you know, there's supposed to be respite for us. And so when you have a natural disaster and the thing that's supposed to keep you safe is the thing that takes everything away, it's very hard for your physical being and your spiritual being to really understand those two things. It's
Mhm.
very confusing. And that's what I had been going through. This opportunity I got from Tally to sit in the pasture, which sounds like a very boring thing to do, but it's actually where the healing really happened.
Mhm.
And I didn't know this at the time. I mean, it took me probably a year. I think Tally knew it, but I didn't realize because she had been a horsewoman for, decades, and she'd owned over 100 horses, and she was doing equine therapy. But what I realized is that when you go through this trauma or any trauma, you start kind of putting a big shell on and you just start acting the way you think you're supposed to because you feel so unnormal in your skin. You don't actually know how to be anymore because there is no more normal. And so the thing with horses, they're just giant mirrors. And so when you spend time with them, they want you to be authentic. And when you're not authentic, it's confusing and scary for them because they can't assess. So they don't care if you're happy or crying or frustrated. They just want it to be in alignment. So, like, if you feel sad, but you're acting happy, there's not alignment there. So you become a threat to them. And so what they're reflecting is that there's two different things happening and it's confusing and they'd rather not be around you. And what I learned through this time of literally just sitting in a chair in a pasture was the days that I would show up and try to be happy and I really wasn't, the horses would stand at the other end of this little quarter-acre pasture. If I showed up and was genuinely happy, then they wanted to hang out. If I showed up and was genuinely sad and sat and cried in that pasture about the fire or what was going on for 2 hours, they would literally circle around me the way that they treat the rest of the herd because I was being genuine. And in society and in the world, everyone I was connected to, if I was sad or having a hard time managing what was going on in my life, everyone wanted to close it down and couldn't manage hearing about it. And the horses were different. I could sit in that pasture and tell them everything I was sad about and genuinely like emotionally break down, and they would just stand there. And so what it did for me is, one, there's the whole side of the energetics of the horses have a heart space that's 14 times bigger than ours, and they actually help us transmute that energy. They actually, like, it's like a big air filter basically for energy, but they're transmuting it for us. But they also taught me what I couldn't do on my own, which was this reflection of like where I was and how I was showing up in the world and where I was pretending to be okay and I really wasn't. And they were telling me that it was okay to be where I was and that when I was actually acting the way I felt, that I was safer to be around. And that was I think the biggest learning for me overall was just that reflection that they just wanted me to be genuine in a world where every human around me was just saying, be okay, get over it, get back into life. And it was just a very big contrast in what, humans wanted connection that made them feel good. Horses wanted connection where I felt good.
It's pretty profound.
Mhm.
It's an unusual relationship. What the heck, Lisa?
It is. Well, and one of the things is, I was talking to you about the transmuting of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the part that you and I have really connected on over the horses, and this
Mm-hmm.
this gift that they have to be able to support us as
Mm-hmm.
humans.
Mm-hmm.
And for a little while, when I was kind of doing this work, and the basis of Elk Dog started being born, I was like, well, is this right? Like, should I be like processing all of this energy through these animals? Like, is this fair?
Right.
Like, what is this
Mm-hmm.
doing to them?
I understand.
And I did a lot of research around it and read as many people as I could, and trying to understand and making sure, like, hey, this is this good? Is this bad? Is this giving them, anxiety? And the reality is they actually will connect to you. And I experienced this with Tally when she would invite me into equine therapy circles, and to be able to support her there, is the horses actually have trauma that they cannot process in the way that humans do. Like, they can't cry the way that human can, or they can't break down the way a human can. So a lot of times these exercises through equine therapy, when they can connect with someone and that human has a similar trauma, because they are the same things: abandonment,
Mm-hmm.
you know, fear, all of those things. If the horse is carrying a similar energetic, the human actually is helping them pass grief in a way that would take them a lifetime to pass.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of these horses that are really attuned to this kind of work, you'll actually see them resonate with certain people. And it's actually really fun to watch when you put a circle of people together of which horses will go to which people, because they actually identify the energetic within the herd as well. And so this process of sitting in the pasture um, is beneficial for both sides.
So are you saying that we transmute for them as they are transmuting for us?
Yeah, so it goes back to somatic therapy that we've all heard about, right? Whereas humans, we can somatically move a lot of energy, like in a physical way. And horses can too in their own ways. But yeah, we can actually help them through the tears, through kind of that like visible grief that we don't see horses do. They can actually process some of their trauma as well. And it's just connection, right? It's a recognition of similar energies. And in recognition is a lot of place where we heal.
Hmm. It's fascinating. I mean,
Mhm.
it's actually when you break it down scientifically, it's fascinating. And then as someone who experiences it, it's kind of it's kind of the most simple thing in the world,
Yes.
but it takes a little bit of trust between both parties to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting is there isn't anything really to do. And that was, I think, the
Hmm.
gift of meeting Tally was like, it is simple. It is as simple as sitting in a pasture. And that is the part of life where I think all of our healing is often, around time, but having something that's such a great tool that's so simple was such a gift. And I say, the the fire, as hard as it was one of the hardest times in my life, is truly just been a gift and kind of redirecting me back to the things I loved, and just kind of finding my way back to horses.
Right. And perhaps finding your way back to yourself,
Mhm, absolutely.
to your authentic, true self. You have since then moved to Colorado and you have your family. You have your ranch family. And So I personally know, Lisa, this has not been like something that's just sort of gradually happened. It basically has happened in a year that you went from, well, do I want a horse? Do I really want ownership of a horse? To you, so you now kind of have your own little farmyard. I mean, there's some characters there.
Definitely. I did. I shortly after the fire, a couple years after the fire, I got an opportunity to live on a full functioning ranch here in Colorado. So I spent a year there. And when that year was up, it was, time for me to decide, do I really want to do this? Or, am I going to, you know, act rational and go back to kind of a very beautiful and comfortable life that I
Hmm.
had?
Hmm.
And the thought of leaving land, and they say the cure or the medicine is in the cause. And so that was kind of my learning through the fire, is that I got rattled by how strong nature is,
Hmm.
and I knew that that was kind of where the cure for me lived. So yeah, so I moved. I live in a place called McClure Pass, so I'm 40 miles from a gas station and on 50 acres, and went back and forth for I think 6 or 7 months. I mean, Diana, you were having these conversations with me about whether or not I was going to really do this or not.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think one day I decided, I had some stuff happen and I was like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. I brought in two horses. One was an owner surrender. The other one was a rescue from All Seated in a Barn. And then All Seated also helped me rescue two donkeys that were basically untouched. And so from there, we got sheep and, barn cats. And
Right.
we were also, through this process, a few months later, had another owner surrender horse showed up and a goat that needed a home. And so we kind of just like jumped in, just jumped in.
And the geese and the ducks.
And then geese and ducks. Yep.
And Clancy, who came
And
first?
well,
Of course,
Clancy
the
was
duck.
here.
Yeah,
Clancy was here the whole time. Yeah.
all the time. So let's talk about All Seated in a Barn and how you connected with them and the gift that kind of resulted from that. Uh, and you rescued, I mean, who rescued here? Who? Who really
Yes.
rescued who? But tell me a little bit about that process. And I really want to talk about Elk Dog Clothing Company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the process of trying to find a horse, I was kind of looking in every direction,
Hmm.
asking people, and then looking at horse rescues. And that was kind of what I was drawn to. And it started out with a post. Talia, who's the founder of All Seated, is this incredibly dedicated woman to horse rescue. And she had posted a picture of these two donkeys that, for whatever reason, I just was drawn to. And, you know, um, I had them in mind because I knew I wanted to get sheep and they can act as guardians.
Hmm.
And so I had sent her some money to save them. I don't know. I was just drawn to. And so later I had reached out and made arrangements to actually apply to adopt them. They had never been, they hadn't been handled. You couldn't put them on a halter. They were only 3 years old. And so the great thing about Talia and All Seated in a Barn is that they're one of the few rescues that actually do the work on making sure the animals are healthy. They're not
Hmm.
running them through as fast as they can. They're making sure they get homes. That's their objective.
Hmm.
Um, but they're assessing them. She's very diligent about who she places her animals with and that it's the right fit for the animal based on where the animal is at. And that was something that I admired about the work that she was doing. And during the process of the donkeys getting their care in Texas, another horse showed up, which was Brooks. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it was like this lightning bolt of energy where the trainer that was working with him posted a picture, and I was like, that's my horse.
Hmm.
And it was so intense. And I was like, nope, that's it. And so I reached out to her and went through that process, went to Bakersfield,
Hmm.
um, met Brooks, had a very resonant connection to where he was. Also with just meeting him, knowing he was a great horse, but then also making that commitment of he was going through a similar thing that I was going through,
Mm-hmm.
had gone through with the fire, and he needed me to be committed to him, whether he was going to be ridden or not ridden, and that we were going to kind of take this journey together. And he's a very stoic in Chinese medicine. He's something that you would call a metal horse. So he can tend to be very stoic, even if he's in pain,
Hmm.
and very calm. And he's just got this beautiful, beautiful energy to him. And so yeah, so it was a commitment and it was hard. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you and I talked. I called my friend Chip, who you know,
Yep.
who had helped train some horses and do some rescue. And, he was a great kind of sounding board and making a decision that, again, not a rational decision, but
Right. I know.
just,
None of this is based on rationality. And all
yeah,
horse owners will know that. We understand this. We relate.
yeah. And so that's where Brooks came into play. And then Shiloh was a connection through Tally, the woman I worked with in Malibu.
Mm-hmm.
And a wonderful woman and her daughter had Shiloh for a long time, but they just didn't have the time and he was getting older. And when
Mm-hmm.
horses get older, they tend to be at risk.
Mm-hmm.
I had known Shiloh for a long time, so I was grateful to take him. And he's taught me a ton
Mm-hmm.
about showing up and being strong and being a leader and having strength. So that's kind of where it started, and all seated, getting to go to her facility, spend some time with her, and see the amount of work that goes into what she's doing is kind of what sparked Elk Dog.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking for a way to both support Tally, my friend in Malibu, who does amazing work, and it's an expensive process with a very, low return. High return for the benefit factor, but financially it can be a tough business. And without her, I wouldn't be here. And so I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to find a way for these women who have dedicated their lives to the horse, to be able to survive. And my
Mm-hmm.
background is, well, it's two things. My background is apparel. And so that's what I knew. But
Mm-hmm.
there was also this reality of like moving from a totally different life and
Mm-hmm.
and landing into living on land, and the realities of how that changes and what you wear. And there was just this big gap of like, I went from wearing really fashionable clothes to then all of a sudden being in these kind of like men's clothing all the time, because I was ripping pants on fences and
Mm-hmm.
all the things that happen when you're living a life unloading a truck and repairing fences and digging holes and doing all of that stuff. And so
Right.
Elk Dog was born out of kind of my own desire to have clothing that could support that lifestyle. But then, I only live an hour from Aspen. And so if I want to go into town, I just
Yeah.
didn't want to have like, I didn't understand why they had to be different. And so that's kind of where Elk Dog was born. You can buy, denim on the market, but interestingly, even with some of the top workwear clothing lines for women, they don't necessarily make the right changes. So, for example, they
Mm-hmm.
shrink things, but like you
Mm-hmm.
can't fit your gloves in your pocket. And when you're working out on land, that becomes really important. So that's what we've done with Elk Dog Workwear, is we have just kind of made those small modifications to make sure that they work and function for living on land, but then is still something that you're happy to live with and wear into town. And so it's kind of like the strength of these horsewomen is reflected in what we're doing, but we're not taking away the fact that they are women. Um,
Right.
and that's what, we're kind of trying to accomplish with that. And then the bigger cause behind it is it's just a vehicle for us to give back to these horsewomen who are supporting the horse in general and creating these programs. Because if I was to say, what is my biggest fear about the future? And one of them is that horses won't be a part of it. And at the way things are
Mm-hmm.
going, it's getting harder and harder for people
Mm-hmm.
to have these experiences. And had I not had it, I don't know that I would be doing as well and thriving in the way that I am now.
I understand. I agree. It is getting harder and harder financially to support horses, to have a horse. It's tremendously expensive because of feed prices and hay prices and veterinarian costs and just all those sort of things. They all add up. And then the healing aspect as well. I certainly, on a personal level, experience it almost on a daily, but I'm fortunate. So the opportunities that someone like Tali offers, are sort of precious if you're somebody who lives in the city and you have a very busy life or a different kind of lifestyle. There's people like that do equine therapy, and it is hard to do as a business to survive. So there's just some real magic in the therapy. There's real magic in doing the work with equine therapists, but it's not always an easy business. So,
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and I think that's where they need the support. And that's just what we're trying to do, is create kind of a channel that gives them the consistency, whether it's we pay for their feed every year, or
mhm,
that random vet bill that comes up, but something in order to define and allow these programs to exist. They're working with at risk populations.
right.
So people who are dealing in trauma. It's amazing for kids with autism. What you see come out in these children is unbelievable, and it's beneficial for the kids, but it's also really beneficial to the parents to see these little windows into their humans that are kind of closed off. One of my favorite works to do is people in recovery, because it's again another very vulnerable space. And I've always seen that as a disease connected to disconnection. And
Mm,
so it's another
mm,
place where it becomes really, really important. And then I think girls in general, there's this space of feeling empowered in a world where we've 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 kind of taught them power is external. And I think my experience as a 6-year-old and getting on a quarter horse and being able to like forge this relationship and bond, and really taught me that I had internal power. And it's something I, kind of put down for a long time, but I think it was that memory that came back through all of this of finding like strength and connection.
and talking about Elk Dog as well, let's talk about the name of the company, why it's Elk Dog, and uh, also just personally, the clothing line that you've designed is not only versatile in the fact that if you're a gardener or if you work around the house a lot or if you don't necessarily have to own horses and run cattle, it's that it's something you can wear from home to the grocery store to the PTA to a boardroom. So
Mhm.
the way you've designed it is in such a way I can grab a jacket or a vest and put that over my clothing to keep it either to keep it clean, or secondly, there's a jacket you have that I would show up at any holiday event or boardroom event in a second and run to New York in it as much as I would, wear it out to the ranch to if I needed to pick up feed or something like that. You've made it very versatile and it's very feminine as well.
Yeah, and that's what we basically have given the filter of you have to be able to wear it from the barn to the town.
Yeah.
And because that's the way we live our lives, and that's what we're, trying to accomplish.
Let's talk about your socks.
Yeah. So all of our samples for the denim is in works. So all
Mhm.
of it's ready. You can actually go on the website and see everything. But um, we wanted to at least get started and help
Mhm.
us get this whole project going. So we did launch socks, and these are actually our graphic designer worked for us. And there's actually a picture that Vogue featured of Tally
Oh.
when she evacuated the horses for the fire. They ran, her and her sister-in-law had to by hand take, I think it was 8 or 10 horses through Malibu Canyon down to Zuma Beach. And
Mm.
there's actually this really incredibly vulnerable photo that Vogue had featured of her and that experience of the Woolsey Fire. And so that was this graphic actually was designed based on kind of that moment
Ah.
in time and supporting her and other horsewomen like her. And so, yeah, so it goes back to that resonance of that reality of like the horses went through the same experience I did. They were
Mhm.
running through the same canyon to get to safety, that I did, and so I feel incredibly gifted to work that I got to work with them on my own journey and hopefully helped them through their journey. And so we have the socks up online now, and we're
Mhm.
using the funds for that for All Seated in the Barn,
Mhm.
for some rescue. And we're also working with a couple other partners, Tally, who runs Connemara Ranch in Malibu, and another rescue in the Midwest called the Gifted Equine. So those
Oh,
are the three
wonderful.
rescues that we're giving back to right now.
Awesome. And that's the proceeds from the
Proceeds, yeah,
from all
profits from the
sales.
socks are going to um, kind of all three of those.
And the socks, are they a cotton wool blend? Are they waterproof? Are they
Yeah, they're cotton blend socks. They're just a classic crew sock. So they're
Mhm.
perfect just for everyday, easy. They come in three colors. We have them in white. This is the straw color. And then we also have a denim blue.
Lisa? You're such a brander. She's
I am.
excellent at branding. You really are. And I'll feature some of the photos, if that's okay with you, of some of the pictures that
Absolutely.
you've done. And they're super cute. And these are great, comfortable socks, soft, but really durable, correct?
Mhm.
And how much are they?
20.
20. It's a great, and they're a great stocking stuffer. They're a great thing to give right now for Christmas time. And every horse girl and every non-horse girl will love them. And who knows, maybe the guys too. So Elk Dog is about the property itself. Is that right? Or remind me, the Elk
Yeah.
Dog is about what horses are called.
Yeah. So um, I live on 50 acres in McClure Pass, and
Hmm.
we live on a piece of land that actually an elk dog herd resides on the very top of my hill, and they kind of pass through here. And in addition to that, I have Clancy, who anyone who knows me knows Clancy. She is my tried and true. She kind of goes with me everywhere. We're never apart. And so there was a combination of the origin of elk dog actually in American indigenous language is a direct translation of horse. They
Oh,
were called elk dogs, and that's kind of where that translation came. There is a bigger connection to the fact that I live on my land, that Clancy is a huge part of my life and this journey and this elk herd that passes through this
passes through
property.
the property. And the property was originally, I'm sorry, what tribe was it again?
The Ute tribe.
The Ute tribe.
Yeah.
And that's UTE, correct?
Yeah.
So that the elk, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that they went through the top of your property. That's
Hmm.
wild. So it's such beautiful property and really amazing, really amazing, really amazing that you do what you do. Every day I'm always like, how does she do that? I grew up on the farm and I seriously I don't know that I could do it. But and Clancy, your dog, so um I know he's a huge part of your life and such a good dog. He's such a good
Yeah.
dog. She's such a good dog. So Elk Dog Clothing was established for for that reason, for Clancy and for the Ute tribe, and because of the elks that go through your land.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it was just kind of a recognition. I mean, I always want to recognize that, this land doesn't belong to me in any way. It's really
Hmm.
connected to the people who were here before us. And, you know, again, it's that connection back to nature and like what a gift to be surrounded by the animals that are here. And even though I've brought animals onto this property,
Hmm.
we are visitors on the land.
Hmm.
And we've made peace as far as we can with everyone that's here, and just finding our little corner. And you know the big goal I have with enjoying life was learning from the fire and
Hmm.
choosing to do things that I want to do as much as possible, and not getting caught up in like we've talked about what I should be doing. And this feels very right. I don't encourage everyone to go live in 40 miles from a gas station and get a bunch of
Hmm.
animals. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. But
Right.
I do think that part of being here is hoping to reflect of like what are the things that we're not pursuing in our life. What was the 6-year-old you lit up by that you put away, and where can you find space, even if it's for 5 minutes, just finding space for that little part of you that needs to be lit up. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
goes back to, why Elk Dog is giving back to these horsewomen, because what I'm so impressed about all of the horsewomen I've met is that they choose horses every day.
Mm.
And that's what the life is about.
Mm-hmm.
It was something that was told me very early, buying the horse is the easy part. It's that every day thereafter, you have to choose to have them in your life. And so there's a certain amount of strength and dedication and passion with these women that are choosing to do that. And I think there's a lot to learn from that.
You've also had a lot of support, and I don't mean support like you're being given a lot, but it's interesting to watch a community kind of form around you, and that you aren't necessarily the epicenter, but you have a community there that's very giving, and there's a great exchange is one of the things I've noticed, especially among horse people in general or agricultural communities in general. It's a different vibe, and then there's a different sort of community aspect that is maybe missing a little bit from our society right now. And one of the things I've noticed, of course, when I visited you is just how it's easy in a lot of ways, in some ways, because there is a real community there. There's a real sense of support, um, which
Yeah.
is
I mean,
super cool.
coming from where I did and what I did, um, I didn't expect to be welcomed into this life. I
Mm.
expected to earn my stripes. And
Hmm.
in a lot of ways I did, but I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things where horses do really bring people together. And because I've done my best to approach it with humility and ask questions. And I think the one thing that resonates is that I actually care so deeply for the well being, and the amount of people that have shown up or taken phone calls or just will walk me through anything. It doesn't mean anyone's saving me or doing anything for
Hmm.
me. It's a lot of hard work, but there's always people who are willing, when you're genuinely, you know, full hearted trying to do something for the good of these animals. There's always been someone who will pick up a phone, help me through, tell me something to read, or just talk to me for an hour. I mean, when Brooks got here, he had health issues we had to work through, and there's a woman that I know who was just amazing and would just like, I would be in tears, and she's like, "This is normal. He's got to go through this," and it was just such a hard thing for me to watch him, do his own healing and his own recovery, and how his
Hmm.
health changed over that course of time, and to get him to like a really healthy space. And so there's just a lot of camaraderie, I think, in those
Hmm.
parts of where
Hmm.
people have just been rooting for me, which has been
Hmm.
you know, a really big gift. But, it's also hard work,
Hmm.
and there's a commitment. But I think when you're on your path, when you're on something that makes you incredibly lit up and empowered, I think that work, my best days are when I've spent all day outside. And they're hard days, they're long days, but I get that time with them. And yeah, it's like nothing else you get to experience because you're doing something you love.
Beautiful. So we're going to list your website for Elk Dog Ranch. We'll list all of the rescue websites as well. And is there a direct link available for the socks?
Yes, I can send that to you.
Okay, that's super. And then, so a couple of questions. If you're a person that's potentially interested in getting involved with animals or agriculture, or just, want to get a sense of what farm life, ranch life might be like, or even if it's, buying an acre and or leasing an acre and starting a whole life on that. Do you have any suggestions of how you dip your toe into that? See if it vibes right with you. Is it something you can achieve? Is it something you want to be a part of?
Yeah, there's tons of places to volunteer. I
Mhm.
also recommend getting in touch with whatever your community's land conservation group is.
Mhm.
There's usually land trusts. They do a ton of events based on land. They'll know a lot of landowners within the area, so they can kind of get you connected there. There's a lot of horse rescues also
Mhm.
that will gladly take on volunteers. I know All Seated in the Barn, one of the things I loved about her is that she's open and wants people to see her horses and come visit. And I think it's just getting outside, and making a difference. I mean, for me, it started with I was volunteering in Malibu at Malibu Creek as a docent, and then I
Mhm.
was planting oak trees um, in that area. So it doesn't have to be that you jump in all the way, but I think
Mhm.
it's like continuing to make these little steps where you're out there and finding your connection and where those places are. But the land trust and anyone doing land conservation, I think, is a great place to start because they will know about everything that's going on and know the impact of your donations. Like, yes, I want everyone to buy a pair of socks, but honestly, if you want to directly donate to All Seated
Mhm.
or the Gifted Equine or Tally at Connemara Ranch, or if you just want to go ride in Malibu, that's a great way to support these businesses.
Mhm.
And just that's what they're not, especially with the rides, they're not, she's not looking for handouts. She just wants people to come and enjoy, and you'll get a lot out of it too.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Do you have plans, Lisa? I mean, we'd like to see Elk Dog clothing expand. We want this to be a big deal. Well, I'm just going to say this. I've really admired personally how you're very patient with the entrepreneurship of this. And I think in our world, we like to, especially we both lived in LA a while. We both see how you kind of go from nothing to stardom in a heartbeat sometimes. And you sort of want things to blow up and be big. There's the truth is, if you really talk to people in business, a lot of times it's 5 to 10 years before you ever really see any returns, anything really that seems substantial. I mean, it's a long haul.
Mhm.
So I've really admired how you've been very patient with this process. And of course, it could blow up tomorrow, but then it's also like it has its own life force. It's taking its own journey.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think, I lean into the horses a lot for that on where it goes
mm,
and what's right and what's not. And they've definitely guided that in a certain
mm,
way. But we absolutely have plans. We're working on a little pop-up store in a little mountain town here just to get us started and get us going. But ultimately we're working on a space. My dreams are around creating a space where people can come and see horses and be around them and, kind of give back to what was given to me. It's very hard to find places that you can go be around a horse. It's the one of the and I get why, it can be dangerous. There's a lot
mm,
of accountability with horses. There's a lot you need to know. And so it's hard to find someone who even has the time when you have horses. It's such a full-time responsibility.
yep.
And so it's something that I really want to make sure happens. Whether it's I mean, I have people out on the property all the time that are, whether it's their kids and it's, you know, finding that space. And I really committed that if I ever had horses, I would allow people to have access to them
Mm,
because it was something that I needed. And so that's kind of where the long-term goal is how do we make this accessible in a larger way, and how can we continue to help, find horses that we can rescue, um,
mhm.
and kind of create kind of a bit of an elk dog herd here that is really connected and tuned to healing and just kind of the horse human connection.
And the little pop-up store that you're working on currently, is that Redmond?
Redstone.
Redstone, excuse me, probably. I'm just gonna say it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So, that's super exciting, and I personally am super proud of you. I've watched you
Thank you.
really walk through fire literally and really prove yourself in a way that I'm sure a lot of people never imagined. I mean, you're really a true pioneer spirit.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, you have been such a support and cheerleader for me on the days where it's been hard and I want to pack up and,
Mhm.
move back to automatic sprinklers and all
I
of those
understand.
things.
I know.
So, yeah, thank you. Thank
Tr
you.
You're welcome. You're doing it. All right. Any closing remarks you wanna make? Anything you wanna leave that in essence that you wanna part with that the horses might say to our audience?
Yeah, I think it's just being present. I mean, that is the thing that they do so well, is that they are in the moment and they are open and they were reflective. And I think, I read a quote the other day about someone who said that a trainer that said that they believe that horses lead us to consciousness. And I think it's through their ability to be incredibly present and their desire to be within community. So wherever we can reflect those qualities in ourselves, I think we're better off.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lisa. Hopefully, we'll be hearing more about what happens with the Elk Dog Ranch. And I know that it's going to expand and be something amazing. It already is. Um, but I know those dreams are going to come true.
Thank you. I appreciate it.